Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have you joining us for another session of our Harness Giving webinar series. We know that fundraising can be challenging, and that is why we brought together some of the top experts in the field to speak on topics they know best. So whether you're a small grassroots organization or a large nonprofit, our webinars are designed to give you the tools you need to take your fundraising efforts to the next level. And the best part, our webinars are completely free and will be available on demand after they air live. So while everyone settles in, let's get to know each other. Use the chat to introduce yourself, tell us where you're chiming in from and what you're most excited to learn about today, and anything else you want to share with the group. My name is Simone, Marketing Director here at Harness Giving, and I'm excited to be your host from sunny Tampa, Florida. For those of you who may not be familiar with Harness Giving, we are a fundraising platform that makes it easy to steward donors, start and grow a recurring giving program, and even handle event registration and ticket sales. Our platform is designed to make fundraising as simple and streamlined as possible so you can focus on what really matters, making a positive impact in your community. Okay, it's great to see some familiar faces in the crowd. Hi, Jennifer, welcome. I'm sure people are still settling in, so let's move on to our topic. Our session today is called Annual Campaigns from Strategy to Success, presented by Rex Otey from Convergent Nonprofit Solutions. A little bit about Rex. Rex has generated over $100 million for various nonprofit organizations over his 30-plus year career. He has led development efforts for churches, nonprofits, and universities. As a Chief Development Officer and career fundraiser, Rex has met the challenges of managing campaigns, annual funds, major gifts, planned giving, alumni and parent programs, and large teams of volunteers. His energetic, innovative approach and focus on genuine relationship building equip him to revitalize existing programs and create new ones, continually exceeding fundraising goals throughout his career. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Rex to the stage. Rex, welcome.
Hey, hello, Simone. Hello, everyone. Great to be with you. Simone, did we talk about you being in Tampa? I don't remember that.
Yep, it's been chilly, but it's sunny Tampa, Florida all the time. So
yeah, I'm right down the road in Sarasota. So good. Yep, good to be with you, neighbor. And thank you for the chat and introductions. I saw an early one from my birth and home state of West Virginia. Yay. But I'll say good morning and good afternoon because I also saw one from Alaska. So anyway, welcome. Welcome. So good to be with you to discuss annual campaigns. And by the way, big thank you to Harness and Simone for hosting us today. I am thrilled. And by the way, if you're not taking advantage of Harness and the awesome tools that they have, do yourself a favor, do your org a favor, and check them out. They are a terrific organization, and I know some of you already are, but for those that might be new to what they do, please go and check them out. So as a good bit of my work these days is in the capital campaign arena with Convergent, so many times over the years, the joke has been, annual fund is not very sexy, when you're doing capital campaign work. But having spent the majority of my 33 years in annual fund and annual campaigns, I'll tell you, by the way, I look a lot younger than I am. I know a little secret. A capital campaign, most likely cannot be successful without an active and successful annual fund and annual campaign. So I happen to believe annual campaigns are a little sexy, and we'll talk about why annual campaigns are so important to the success of other types of campaigns, capital, planned giving, and all those things here in a moment. But here we go. Thank you, Simone. Did forget to share my screen. Let me do that very quickly. There we go. Hope everybody can see that well. Okay, so who are we? Who is Convergent? And why are we here with you today? We are a national consulting firm that, as I just mentioned, we specialize primarily in the capital campaign and feasibility study space, but really we like to just think of ourselves as helping all types of nonprofits, all shapes and sizes, building their fundraising capacity. As I was thinking through our time together today, I just jotted down just the first states that came to mind. We are currently working in Washington State, Nevada, New York, North and South Carolina, Georgia, Virginia, Iowa, Florida, and to my West Virginia friend, we just signed our first partnership agreement with an organization in West Virginia. So excited to do that. So one of the things that I've been around the block a couple times and have been with other consulting firms, all terrific organizations. But one of the things that sets Convergent apart is we really lean into an investment-driven model. And what does that mean? Well, that means that we talk to top stakeholders and donors about investing in your organization. It's a little nuanced. There's a whole lot more to it in what we do, but just in the language, it's a little nuanced, but it's so big. Rather than donating to the organization, we talk about investing in the organization, and we prove return on investment and all kinds of things like that. So that's just one of the little things that sets Convergent apart. But that's why we are here today. So Simone had already asked about your name and organization. So I would just love to take a quick minute, and maybe just talk about what you'd love to get out of today. And Simone has graciously agreed just to kind of field the chat. So Simone, if you don't mind, maybe as people pop in, just share a little bit about why people are here and what they hope to receive today. Go ahead and enter in your chat for just a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I imagine it takes a little bit of time to type, so we'll give them a minute. But we do have Quinetta. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Marina. So Heller says, preparing for spring direct mail campaigns, want to get the most out of Harness and other resources.
Great.
Do you want me to keep reading, or?
Yeah, just a couple more, Simone. That would be great.
Yeah,
you don't need to go through them all, but.
So Michael and Jennifer would like to know what our database strengths are, and I'm going to direct that over to our customer success team to reach out with a whole list of things that our database can do. Doug would like to hear your thoughts on snail mail versus digital, quote unquote, e-blast, so emails. Jessica with Boys and Girls Club of the High Rockies. She says, we have never done an annual campaign before, so looking for ideas on how to get started. Ooh, they're coming in now. I promise I'm not skipping any. They kind of pop in, so if I miss it, I will get back to it. Eileen says, we are a very small nonprofit and have a small donor database, trying to determine if we should formalize our annual request. And Quinetta says, would absolutely love to learn how to utilize Harness to increase our annual campaign giving results. I believe I got them all.
Awesome. That's so good. Well, I will, I wrote a couple of those down and will absolutely address, particularly at the end, but I do want to make this a discussion today rather than a presentation. And so if you guys have a question, Simone's going to be watching. Simone, don't hesitate to interrupt me. It will not disrupt me at all. So now what my only caveat there is if it's relevant to, if it's relevant to what we're talking about at that time. If not, we can, depending on time, we can revisit at the end and on our Q&A time. So anyway, thank you all so much. So as I mentioned, I'd love to have more of a discussion today. And what are we going to talk about? Simply put, best practices for maximizing your annual campaign. You mentioned, somebody mentioned small nonprofit I hope that we can help inspire you to absolutely formalize your requests and demonstrate why. Tips for engage and inspiring your audience to take action. That's real. Obviously, at the end of the day, that's one of the most important pieces. And frankly, strategies for measuring and optimizing the success of your campaign. We're going to talk a little bit about why it's important to evaluate and measure. So, what is an annual campaign? Most nonprofits use annual giving campaigns to raise unrestricted funds for basic operations and programming. Sometimes you've heard unrestricted versus restricted, or even partially restricted, but we're talking about unrestricted funds today. In general, annual campaign funds are not used to carry out specific projects, but to promote and ensure the organization's mission is met. Keep the lights on, professional development, technology, equipment. These are things that often get overlooked in big, sexy capital campaigns. And they are absolutely critical to the day-to-day operation of your organizations. We used to talk a lot about the things like professional development, technology, equipment, programming, that sort of thing. But, for some of us, frankly, just paying the power bill is a really important aspect of our annual fund. And I don't say that lightly. I know that we might have all different sizes, shapes of organizations represented today, and some have a very robust annual fund and maybe even a big endowment, and some of us are day to day, and that's okay. And we know that at the end of the day, our mission, we believe in our mission, and we believe that the work that we're doing is serving the people to the best of our ability, or animals, or whatever our mission is. And so annual campaigns are so important to just maintaining the day-to-day operation at a really high level. An annual campaign is staff and board driven. This sort of sounds like a definition. To secure operating funds by obtaining unrestricted gifts from primarily, we're going to talk about this here in a minute, primarily individuals during a defined period of time. Some of us have fiscal years that are January to December. Some of us, I was always, most of my day job, real world job, was in higher ed. We seem to be on a July to June timeframe, but it's a defined period of time, all the while demonstrating the impact of an organization's mission. While fundraising, I do want to mention fundraising events. I just some of you may have heard me say Sarasota. My wife is a head of school here in Sarasota, and we went to an amazing event last Saturday night that raised a bunch of money. My wife told me the net yesterday morning, and I was blown away. So I'm a big proponent in events, but I'm also will tell you that we can't survive on events alone. Some organizations still try to do that, and if given the opportunity to share, I would say that's really hard work these days. And so Interstage Left, running an annual campaign that helps connect the overall strategy, and again, leading towards fulfilling the mission of your organization. This is because annual giving campaigns target donor acquisition and retention and aim to generate a steadily increasing amount of contributions for operational support. Again, in that time frame, that defined time frame. They also seek to create and cultivate major planned gifts. Kind of made a point to that early on, and we will visit that in a minute. Again, I don't think you can have a successful capital campaign without having that base of support already there, kind of feeding you prospects. But we'll talk about that here in a minute. Donor acquisition and retention are both difficult and expensive. Again, Harness will help you with that. Retention rates hover around 45%. So what does that mean? Well, it means all of our wonderful supporters may not support us next year. It's true. We have to both earn and work hard to maintain their support. And it's easier to focus efforts on money on keeping your donors, but acquisition is no less important. So, working hard and earning their support. Donors often have 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 organizations that they support. And so oftentimes what happens is we're in a cycle. And so our annual fund efforts, if we are in front of them on a regular basis, which we will talk about, if we're in front of them on a regular basis, then they are more, and we show appreciation and gratitude, and we talk about how their funding, their investment in our organization so not only sustains, but helps our organization thrive. We're going to be more in a position to maintain a cycle of regular support from our organizations. So let's give a trill definition of what annual fund is. Annual fund includes gifts that are made in response to annual fund and in solicits that underwrite. let me try that again, folks. The annual fund includes gifts that are made in response to annual fund solicitations that underwrite budgeted expenses and are repeatable. You can tell I don't typically read the slides. It is a tool to generate income from annual fund. The annual fund supports the operating expenses. So what are the benefits? There are a number of benefits to running an annual giving campaign. First of all, consistency. And we kind of talked about that a minute ago. Consistency. An annual campaign occurs year after year, meaning it is not only a consistent source of income for your organization, it's also a consistent place for your donors to give. But as I just said, it's also a consistent place to ask for support and frankly, just get your organization's name in front of your donors and prospective donors on a regular basis. Someone mentioned snail mail versus other types of communication. I would tell you, yes, all of the above. You may have heard the term multi-channel solicitation or multi-channel communication. I mean, basically, we want to stay in front of our donors with a measure of respect. I did not have that in my notes at all, but that just occurred to me. Having done this for 33 years, one way, so I expect to, I understand fully communicating with our donors, but if you want to lose me in a heartbeat, and I won't name the organization, a couple, in fact, that send me a 55-cent or whatever postage costs today letter every single month. That is the quickest way to turn me off. So I'm on one side of my mouth, I'm advocating that we stay in regular contact with our donors. That's the consistency aspect of it. But we have to do it with a measure of respect and understanding that, there's lots of evidence. Let me just say this. There's lots of evidence that support a regular monthly communication with your donors. And that does work for a lot of wonderful organizations out there, but that's just not the way that I would suggest doing it. Anyway, donor retention is also critical following the donor engagement and retention cycle. Some of you hopefully have heard of the donor cycle. I'll talk about it in a little bit, but it's basically identifying your donors, cultivating your donors, solicitation, thanking your donors, thanking them over and over again. We will talk about that in a moment. And then you start the whole process over again. But that's keeping your donors involved and active in your organization. And with an annual giving campaign, you can guide your donors through this cycle in a systematic and organized fashion. Flexibility. After years of running a campaign, annual campaigns, your nonprofit should have a good idea of how much in unrestricted will come in every year. This is if you've done it for a while. That will allow you to properly budget for the coming year, but also to shift resources to development programs that are actually working. And so we'll talk a little bit about evaluation here in a moment, evaluating your last year's plan. Because if something's not working, if you mail every year in February and it's a bust, why do you keep doing it? Sometimes for us smaller organizations, frankly, it's a good practice for every organization, but sometimes for a smaller organization, the amount of money that we save is nearly as important as the amount we raise. And so we want to be really smart, and evaluating every year is really important. But back to that, understanding what comes in if you've been doing it for a while. Another tip, by the way, is securing monthly donations. And I do have a comment to talk about that in a moment. But what an amazing way to be able to budget more effectively in the future years if you've got a regular stable of monthly donors. Anyway, above all, your nonprofit has the ability to customize your annual giving campaign to meet the needs of your organization. So annual giving campaigns will, you see these few things here, and I hope some of these are obvious to you. I'm going to give you a minute just to scan them. So we've touched on acquiring and retaining donors. Let me focus for a minute on the last three. Cultivation. One of my favorite concepts in our work is the best cultivation is great stewardship. Think about that for a minute. What a more effective way to cultivate your donors is just to thank them. Thank your donors well and often. Constant cultivation of your highest and most loyal donors. Gosh, we could spend an entire session just talking about stewardship and cultivation. Frankly, 2 sessions. Simone, no pressure. If you want to do 2 more sessions, we can do it. But take the time to build relationship with your top stakeholders. It's so important. Person to person, face to face. There's a great book out there that was introduced to me years ago called Never Eat Alone. And it's essentially, I mean, you're eating breakfast, you're drinking coffee, you're eating lunch. Why do those things in your cubicle, over a bologna sandwich? Take the time to go see people in their offices or at their homes. Take them a cup of coffee. Point is, spend time getting to know your top stakeholders. It's tragic that we can't do this for everybody, but we can't. So we've got to prioritize. Occasionally move your top folks along to the highest level. So just keeping in mind that point I made earlier about, good proving ground for capital campaigns, at some point, there's a natural handoff to either a physical major gift person, if you actually have that luxury in your organization, or at least a mind shift of thinking, okay, we can continue to count on them for annual giving, but they are absolutely a major gift candidate. And that takes a different skill set, different a strategy to embrace these people. So it's a shift, but again, that is one of the benefits and wonderful advantages of annual funds. Annual campaigns are absolutely critical in developing your future major capital and plan giving prospects. And I, occasionally am asked the kind of maybe silly question to you. The question is, would you rather have a $1,200 one-time annual gift, one-time or annual, or would you rather have $100 a month? And I'm telling you, I would choose the $100 a month all day long, because not just what we just talked about, it's a great budgeting tool, but it also shows a different level of commitment and love to your organization. And that, with the right amount of Google search and wealth screening. If you're a larger organization, you may have the luxury of having a prospect researcher. Most of the organizations that I've worked for, including colleges, have not had that. So sometimes that falls on us. But with Google and wealth screening, you could determine that $100 a month person might be an incredible major donor prospect. So anyway, that is why we love to cultivate and build donor loyalty, and then why annual campaigns are so important for major capital and planned giving. So, effective fundraising. Let's talk fundraising 101. If you don't mind, in the chat, Simone, I'm going to tee you up here. If you don't mind, maybe just take a second to review this slide for a moment. And then why don't you add other ideas to this that would be helpful to everyone attending.
That's a good question.
Oh, thank you. While you're writing, let me just say a few things here. For your top prospects, face-to-face is not just essential, but it's just, again, it's just fundraising 101. You really have got to be in front of your people. At a college that I worked for, it was my first chief development role. Very first day, boss comes in, says, need anything, everything okay, office okay? And then he sets down a table tent, a little card that kind of stands up on its own. And it said, if you're reading this, you're not doing your job. And he said, thanks, have a great day. And the bottom line there is, if you're not out of the office, as we said a minute ago, having coffee and lunch and those kind of things with your top donor prospects, you're missing the boat. Board giving is a absolute non-negotiable, got to be at 100%. People, savvy donors will ask this all day long. It doesn't matter. It's less important. Some people will ask me, do you have a minimum dollar amount for board members? That's impossible to do. Now, some larger organizations can do that effectively, but most of us can't. And so it's more about understanding who they are and asking for a specific amount that would be a stretch gift for them that shows the importance of their service to your organization. But the fact is, participation is the most important part there. Ask your top prospects for a specific amount, including your board. Number 7 is a kind of a big duh. Stewardship is absolutely critical. If I were your partner, I would help you craft a stewardship protocol and would expect you to follow it. And basically that just says it's an if-then statement. If Simone gives $1,000 to your organization, how are you going to thank her? And there would be, I would tell you at that level, there would be several different ways to thank her. And then the last one, individuals give over 80% of philanthropy. Businesses are important, but your main focus has got to be on individuals. I'm sorry if most of your time is spent with businesses. It's not a waste of time, but the majority of your philanthropy is going to come from individuals, period. Time and time and time, year after year. That is the fact. Okay, Simone, any good content or feedback there?
Yeah, so there's actually a question from Heller. She says, are there recommendations for how to use challenge gifts?
Oh gosh, what a great. Yeah, so let's just, I'll just take a moment and talk about that now. So I mentioned the fundraiser that I was at the other night. We actually had a challenge gift that had been worked on, obviously, prior. So we knew it was there. And by the way, we had 4 large gifts teed up already. They were canned. They were in the can to go toward that challenge gift. Now, sometimes people get really in the weeds about, should it be $1 per dollar match? If they say up to 100,000 and they only get 50, I'm not a big fan of that. I like just a straight up challenge gift in fact, that's the term that I use rather than a match. That's my little distinction there. So I really like the idea of using challenge gifts. I like the fact that it's a way to get some of your top donors involved early on. Again, I would secure it early. I would talk about the impact that quote unquote doubling their gift would have on the organization. And I also like the idea of teeing up a few others to go toward that match. And finally, to reiterate, I would appreciate an untethered commitment, meaning, give it. Don't hold me hostage to, a bunch of different things that like X number of donors, or it's got to be dollar for dollar, or those things. Now, sometimes donors have their own mindset and know what they want, and I'll take their money too. But hopefully that answers your question. If not, let's talk more in the Q&A time. Simone, any others?
Well, I added one. I said,
Oh,
understanding your data to show impact and storytelling. I see it all the time with our clients. They have the biggest impact when they can say this much money accomplishes XYZ and be very specific with the ask. But that was just one I added. Anyone else have any? Any to share?
And Simone, do you mind being, just drilling down a little bit on what you said about a specific ask? I'm a big fan of that, and actually have some thoughts on it in a moment. So do you mind sharing what you have in mind there?
Yeah, I mean, a very specific example is $10 a month feeds this many children, right? Feeds 2 children, 10 children. And it's a very little ask that goes a long way. And that's how the donor would see it. So.
Absolutely. Any other feedback there?
None yet, but
Sure.
these are just such good examples that they covered.
Good. You're buttering up, Simone. All right, thank you. So let's talk about preparing and leaning into following your plan. So I have to tell you guys, this is having a plan and sticking to it is absolutely one of the most critical pieces of a successful campaign. So important. So if your fiscal year, let's just give an example. If your fiscal year is July to June, I would do a hot wash in August. By the way, don't have to answer the question, but who's familiar with the term hot wash? 2 years ago, I had no idea what it meant, but basically it's let's figure out everything that worked, didn't work, the good, the bad, the ugly, the things that could work again if they were improved. What do we absolutely need to get rid of? Who would be more efficient or better in this particular place? So every aspect of evaluation, I would do that very soon after your fiscal year ends. There's going to be a lot of data collection and et cetera, but as soon as practical, do it so that it's fresh on your mind. Start planning. Let's again, back to the July to June example, start planning in the fall for your next fiscal year. Who's heard of a Gantt chart? Don't have to answer, but actually I would enjoy, Simone, maybe just an informal poll, maybe just a raising your hand or clapping, who's heard of a Gantt chart. Gantt chart is, for those that don't know, it's a way to map, it's an Excel document. It's a way to map out what and who's responsible for what and when it's due. And, a kind of a take on it is a waterfall chart. Some of you may have seen that, but let's use your spring appeal, for example. When's the first draft due? Who's the responsible party for it? And make sure when the draft is in your calendar. When does your communication team or your vendor need to have a final draft? What graphics are needed? Who's responsible for creating the graphics? What tech is needed or what data is needed. You know, some of us don't necessarily have a database person. When is that due? All of these things would be in a Gantt chart spelled out. So let's say the letter is due to the printer on March 1st. All these dates will be working backwards so that the draft is, in place, the data, the list for whom you're mailing to is in place, etc. So, all right, thank you for the poll. 64% of you have heard of a Gantt chart. Really simple Google. There's lots of great examples out there. I'm ashamed to tell you. I'm proud to tell you. Somebody asked me for a Gantt chart example the other day, and I Googled it and sent it to them. That's what you get for a high-priced consultant. But Gantt charts are a really effective way to maintain your plan. Bottom line is craft the plan and stick to it. You know, we talked about not killing your donors by mailing them every month. Again, some organizations are very effective at this, but I would lean towards maybe a 4 mail a year and supplement it with various different forms of electronic and marketing pieces and publications. If you do a newsletter a couple times a year, great to have a little article in there or even an ad in there. So one of the questions at the very top, Simone, that you took for us was snail mail versus others. I'm a big believer in all of the above, a multi-channel approach to reach people, because believe it or not, or like it or not, good old handwritten letter is still effective for a large part of our population. And I don't want to, make it into an older versus younger, but there is some level of a reality to that. Our more senior population really enjoy opening a letter. Our younger folks are all about efficiency and tech. And so sometimes even emails are less effective depending on age group. Sometimes we've got to go to text giving operations and where, utilizing great firms like Harness and other to help us do those type of things. So lots and lots of ways to get after your donor. But the bottom line for me in this slide is create a plan and stick to it. Let's talk about a gift range table. Determine the gifts you need to meet your goal. This is an important piece for both you, the organization, as well as great optics for your top donors. Let me share an example with you. So this is, please don't let the number scare some of you. I pulled this the other day right off of a campaign a capital campaign that we are doing those. So it's a bigger number, but I just wanted to share the example with you. So if $5 million goal, what we know to be true is to be successful, you're going to need a lead gift in that 20% range. So a $1 million lead gift. Some of you have probably remembered this if you've been around as long as I have in the shape of a pyramid. This is a cleaner view, in my opinion, but the pyramid, you remember there was the top gift, and then there was another level of still very high level lead gifts that are critical, and then it just goes down from there. But where we generally operate in the annual fund is in that bottom part of the pyramid, but in this example, this would be for your entire annual campaign. You got to have the lead gifts to be successful, but in this case, you can see the 5 and under or the $5,000 level. You got to have those all to be successful. So in Simone's example, she talked about earlier, $10 a month feeds a family. That is a incredible messaging, and it meets all those criteria we've already talked about. It's a monthly contribution. It's $120 a year. that would point me to somebody doing that as somebody that really cares about the organization. It's a budgeting tool. But anyway, this is a great example, even to sit down with a top donor to say, Jim and Mary, where might you be on this range table if we were to talk to you about this organization that means so much to you? It's a great optic or a visual to share with your top donors. So create a strong case. So you remember the Gantt chart, have all this set the prior year. In a capital campaign, you create a 10-page, for example, really beautiful case for support that talks about the mission and the organization and talks about the values and talks about what you hope to accomplish that year. It's an expensive document, and that's not what I'm talking about in this case. I'm talking about a case for support that it could be a one-pager. It could just be a paragraph in every single communication that you put out that year. It could be 1 year specific, but tell your story. Have a support collateral. Way back, if some of you are as old as I am, there was a rule of thumb way back with direct mail. You got to have the letter, you got to have an insert, and you got to have the reply device in there. It's really sort of the same for everything. You got to have a means to reply, and it's really good to have some visual that's telling the story. Great opportunity to set up your harness page here. So, and speaking of case, those of you that have worked in higher education, there was the acronym for case was often said, copy and steal everything. It was endorsed. So if you see a material collateral from a great organization, use it. I mean, put your own spin on it, but use it. I mean, more often than not, we are not competition with the nonprofit down the road. I mean, sometimes we're competing for the top tier of donors, but there are plenty of people that love animals that could care less about the people services. And I have fun telling you that my mom is one of them. She'll support animal issues all day long. And, besides her church doesn't support much people services deal. But it's less about competition and more about providing wonderful content for your donors. Let's talk about building a prospect list. Some of you have a really wonderful detailed database. That's fantastic. But for those of you that are on the beginning side of this, really biographical information is important, obviously. I would add email to this list, again, back to our point of multi-channel. If you have a giving history, that is really important because it helps us determine, increased levels of asks, to Simone's point, asking for a specific amount, keeping track of event attendance, because again, that demonstrates people are loyal to your organization, and any other information that might be important. And I would just tell you, this is a great point to show how important databases are, but some of you are probably, again, you're in an Excel doc, and that's okay, but I would just endorse the fact that there are plenty of really inexpensive databases in there that will tickle you when it's time to reach out to a particular person. The technology has advanced so much that databases are really important today. You do not need the top tier tools, but anything is better than nothing. Let's talk about evaluation. I'm looking at the time and want to leave plenty of time for questions, so I'm going to start cruising here. Donors that have given $500 or more, it's a great time to increase. And these are just hypothetical levels here, but let's look at the $2,000 level. That's a great opportunity to start thinking about, okay, perhaps this is a major gift prospect. One of my favorite expressions is work your prospects top down, inside out. So that means, and we're going to show you a slide here, board first, top prospect second, and then work your way down from there. Let's talk about campaign phases. Phase one, board and staff first, always. Significant gifts and past supporters second, and then a public, more general phase third. Board campaign, we talked about earlier, 100% giving is absolutely critical. It's I dare to say non-negotiable. Board members should be asked face-to-face, ask for a specific amount. And let me say this first. Treat your board members, by the way, just in full transparency, this was a raw learning for me after 30 plus years of doing this. This is fairly new epiphany to me about 2 years ago. We must treat our board members like our top donors. It's easy to forget this because they're serving, and they're just part of the organization, but they deserve every bit of cultivation, stewardship, and general attention as your top donors. So back to here, ask for specific amount, cultivate them, love on them, and steward them, okay? Let them know how important they are and how much you appreciate their financial support, of course, along with everything else they do, time, treasure, talent. Staff campaigns, just a couple things here. Supervisors, do not solicit your staff. Please do not do that. Have volunteers do that, or have peer solicitation happen. I will tell you, much different than what I said earlier about boards. Participation is absolutely the way to go here. Don't ask for a specific amount. It's a great way to just give examples like Simone said earlier. Hey, we're just appreciative of your support. We can do it in a payroll deduction. We would love to have 100% participation. And so whatever gift you're most comfortable with, you are giving your best hours of your day to this organization. The example Simone said earlier, here's an example, maybe $10 a month out of payroll deduction could accomplish this for the organization. Group solicitation there is absolutely okay. Past donor phase. Let me just say it's worth noting that campaigns fail to lack of askers. Okay, make sure you've got a nice army of volunteers. And I'm going to tell you, segmenting. Hope you are familiar with that term. When I was in higher ed, it was always a dirty word on my team, but everyone totally understands the importance of it. So what does segmenting? Here's some easy examples. I wish that I could see all your faces. I'd ask for just a hand wave, but who knows the term libance and sibance? It's basically just a term for they gave last year, but they haven't given yet this year. Sibance. They've given some years in the past, but didn't give last year. That's a great place just to segment. And when you segment, you should personalize your letters. So, dear Rex, we so appreciate your support last year. Or let's look at the Sibon example. Dear Rex, you've given generously in the past, and we would love to invite you back in. Non-donors, first-time donors, all great ways to segment. Giving clubs. Hey, as a member of our 1963 society, you know that when our organization was founded in 1963, we couldn't have done anything without the support of generous donors, blah, 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 blah. Segmenting and personalization is very important in this phase. And lastly is the community phase. Basically, this is targeted mail, personalize if you can, it would be great. But not always possible. Use consistent messaging across the board. A lot of these, if you just change the first paragraph and the last paragraph, it's perfect. Lean into local media. Anyway, this is your donor acquisition opportunity. Again, donor acquisition can be pricey at times. But it's really important, obviously, especially knowing that retention is what it is, retention rates. We always need to be adding new donors to the fold. So what do we do after the campaign? Sorry if I'm talking too quickly. I want to give time for questions here. This is a really great, as we talked about earlier, a hot wash. But basically take a look at every aspect of the campaign. What worked, what didn't work, what should we do differently and better next year? It's just critical, folks. Did you code a particular mailing? If so, how did it fare in June versus the one that you did in November? Evaluation is super important. And obviously, we want to thank our donors. I said it earlier, and this is not my quote, but it's one of the best ones I've heard in the industry. The best cultivation is great stewardship. Please print that and stick it on your monitor. Say thank you 7 times. What? Yes, say thank you 7 times. In our example earlier, Simone gave $1,000. You might consider an immediate, if she gave online, I would send an immediate receipt. A lot of times those are automatic anyway. Then send a thank you letter from the Chief Development Office. I would consider a handwritten card from the CEO of the organization. You might even send a postcard from the board. If you serve kids, a postcard from a child, or even a call from a volunteer, invite to an event. All these things are ways to thank your donors. And I said earlier, develop a system, develop a protocol, and stick to it. All right. What takeaways did we have? Excuse me.
So I do have a question that came in about 5 minutes ago from Jessica.
Awesome.
It was a prospecting question on something that you said, but she asks, how do you find giving history of prospect owners who are not a part of your own database already?
How do you find giving history? Is that what it is, Simone?
Yes.
So a great tool, it's not so much giving history, but capacity. Now you can do the legwork, the hard legwork of going, like if you're in a larger city. I just moved from Charlotte, North Carolina, so I can tell you all the different galas and annual fundraising events that are going on. A lot of times they put their thank you virtually, or sometimes the annual report of those organizations is a great way to look at how organizations or how individuals support their organizations. That's a lot of work, and it's absolutely no guarantee that person they gave $2,500 to the Red Cross means that they're going to support your humane society at that level, right? I mean, we've got to find the connection. But one way, if you're working there, you're working with them already, they're in your if you've done a donor acquisition, for example, you've got them in your database. One thing that you can do is there's lots of wealth screening tools out there. And if you have name, address, and some other, the more information you have, the better. But you can run a group of names through wealth screening, and it will tell you, okay, they're capable of giving at this level and various different categories. By the way, a lot of information you don't need that comes out with those wealth screening tools, but that is a way to find that. I don't know that I answered your question directly, because bottom line, it's just hard work if you don't have finding what a giving history to another organization besides sleuthing all the other organizations in town. But the wealth screening tools are based on that algorithms that they troll who's giving at what level and when and to whom. I'm sorry, Simone, what was that?
I was going to say, if I can add one, I've done a marketing campaign with mailers, and USPS actually has a prospecting tool where you can, if you have zip code, you can actually look at areas and just get income. And I think that also gives you a little bit of insight to maybe what range or what segment of group people might fall into.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Next question. So we have Heather says, have you ever worked with Little Green Light as a CRM? If so, what are your thoughts? Do you recommend? And thank you, Doug, for also chiming in and engaging. He says, Little Green Light, surprisingly easy to use and robust for a low cost. But if you have any insight, Rex, go for it.
I could not have said it any better. I worked with an organization about a half a dozen years ago that had nothing but complaining to do about the thing. And for whatever reason, that person left the organization. I was still partnering with them. The new person they hired said, oh my gosh, what an amazing tool this is. And it is very low cost. And I think it just was the person didn't have a grasp on how to use it. So I've heard it's very inexpensive. It's very user intuitive. So I appreciate your the person's comments. Yep, very good tool.
Great. So anybody else with questions, feel free to add them to the chat. I actually put together some questions myself just as maybe to inspire other questions to come up. So I talk a lot about setting goals. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice, everyone. About setting goals in blogs and what that even looks like. So setting realistic fundraising goals are crucial for annual campaigns. What are some effective ways to set those goals, and what metrics should our nonprofits use to measure success in their campaign?
That's so good. Well, let me go backwards. There's lots of metrics, and you've got to understand where you are in this process. If you've been doing annual campaigns for many years, then I think it's totally appropriate to evaluate how much money did we raise, how much money did we raise on this particular mailing and this particular event and this particular set of volunteers. Evaluate if the chief development officer, how many in-person asks did they make? How many phone calls did they make a week? There's lots of different ways to go about it, but let me say, for those of us that are newer or younger in our, not age, but younger in our annual campaign work, or even starting at the beginning, those last couple I mentioned would be where the kind of evaluations that I would lean in. How many communications did we make? How many direct asks did we make this year? How many phone calls or virtual meetings or in-person coffees did we have this week? How many emails did I send out a day? So it's, excuse me, it depends on where you are in the process. I'm happy to talk offline if you'd like about just all kinds of different ways to measure success, but the bottom line is do it. Measure it, and don't be too hard on yourself if you're a newer organization.
Yeah, awesome. We do have one more CRM question. Michael and Jennifer, they must be sharing a login, says, what about Bloomerang for a database unless Harness has a built-in database? I do want to say Harness is not a CRM. We have a version on our roadmap, but we pride ourselves on being a tool that can sit on top of any CRM. So Rex, if you have any feedback to Bloomerang.
I don't have direct experience. However, I will tell you that I served organizations in Charlotte that used the tool and loved it. Absolutely loved it. I'm sorry, I don't have much direct user experience with it.
Yeah, I know that there are probably other questions that will stem from this, but I do want to share a resource that Rex shared with me prior. So if you are ready to attempt your first annual campaign or discuss this more, I'm just going to share in the chat their Convergence Capital campaign readiness assessment. I guess it's capital, but you can always continue the conversation that way. I know Rex also has his contact information on the screen. I know we are at 2 o'clock, but if there are any other questions, feel free to let us know. Either email me, all the emails were from me to promote this webinar. And then again, Rex's contact information is on the screen. I want to thank you so much, Rex. This was great. There was so much good information. I have a really quick reminder, every webinar, there's a survey that pops up at the end of this. Please answer honestly. It helps me improve this webinar throughout the series as we continue to grow. Also, I do have a question that says, what topics would you like to hear be detailed? I know we got some about how Harness database or how Harness tool can help with these things, and we can create a whole webinar on just that. But yeah, thank you so much for attending. Thank you, Rex, again. And that concludes our webinar. We'll see you next time.
Well, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.